Hey, we're Rat2 Motorsports.
Hey, I'm Ian, and this is Shawn. And today we're going to talk to you real quick about a few different engine swaps available for the 3 different MR2s.
It's true. We'll make this pretty quick for the first gen. We've got the 4A,
Which
NA,
is the factory motor.
motor,
The 16 valve.
the one you're all familiar with.
And then Toyota themselves added the supercharged option in the late 80s. And that was an improvement, another couple 30, 40 horsepower.
It is. It's nice.
And then apart from that, that's all it came with factory. So when those engines either go or die, or if you're not satisfied with the power you're getting out of it, which is very common for the 16 valve non-supercharged, there are still a handful of options. You can either find an old supercharged motor and rebuild it, or freshen it up and drop it in.
It's true.
Or you can do the common 20 valve swap. And that was the newer version of the 4A in Japan. That gives you 20 valves, 3 intake, 2 exhaust.
Now that's blacktop or
silver top, yeah, depending on the generation. And we'll go into more detail about these in the future. But those give you similar power to the supercharged motor, but they rev really high and they sound really awesome with the ITBs and whatnot. And that's a great option, except they are going up in price.
It's true.
So that's the downside. And I guess the other big option for the first gen
is the 1.5 swap.
The 1.5, putting a 3S motor from these second gens behind me.
Technically, you could put a 5S, but I don't.
The 1.25 swap, as they call it.
Yeah, it's not. Don't bother. It's technically a thing that can be done. It has been done. Just don't do it.
Yeah. So that, and then also the V6. And so once you go 1.5 and get the mounts to do a 1.5 swap, it pretty much becomes a second gen as far as engine swap options.
It's true.
And so that brings us to the second gen. Factory is a 2-liter turbo or the 2.2 non-turbo.
We're going to go briefly back to the first gen.
Oh, yes.
The V6 doesn't fit in the engine bay without a little bit of tinkering, so you will need to...
It does, it's just a squeeze. We'll call it a squeeze. But it physically does fit, unlike the Spider.
It's true.
Which is a whole different...
But it's very difficult.
Yeah. So then we get to the second gen. Factory turbo, decent engine, great engine reliability-wise. It's proven 25 years, and we still see original ones come through the door. But they're tired, and people want to get more power out of them. So what do? You do Gen 3.
Gen 3, Gen 4, Gen 5,
3S motors, and they get subsequently better and better from every year. The best bang for your buck is probably Gen 4 or Gen 5 nowadays, just based off of the engines that are coming from Japan. You can get a quick 300 horsepower to the wheels, no problem, as opposed to the Gen 2 motors, which for that type of power, you're looking at turbos and ECUs and all that. And so the Gen 4s, Gen 5s give you a lot of power for a very good price. And the only other thing that's worth mentioning for the second gen, as we've already kind of mentioned, are the V6s. Now, they fit better in the Gen 2, and they not only fit physically a little easier, but they fit the dynamics of the car a little better. The first gen is happy with 100 to 130 horsepower because it's just a momentum car. The second gen, being a slightly bigger chassis, handles more power much more effectively. So talking about a 300, 400, 500 horsepower car is not unheard of with the second gens.
It's true. And it's not scary to drive around with that kind of horsepower compared to
a first gen is rather scary. So over the years, the V6 options have been the older 3VZs, the 5VZs, the 1MZs, the all aluminum blocks, and they've always been good when it comes to torque, but expandability and high horsepower has never really been the sweet spot, have they, for V6s?
It's true.
So they've always kind of been an alternative to the turbo, but never a fully good substitute. Until the 2GR came around in the late 2000s. And they've been around for a while, but we've tried to make them more affordable in the last year or two. And also, the 2GR themselves is becoming more affordable, being an older motor. So all those things combined, we're seeing a lot of 2GRs now. And they're a fantastic motor because they give you just shy of 300 horsepower out of the box. And they have more...
And it's 300 NA horsepower.
Yes, and that's also torque, so you get a lot of torque. And the benefit, there's slightly more, not a whole lot, but slightly more aftermarket availability for the 2GRs than there were for the older V6s.
True.
And so...
you can thank Lotus for that.
Yes, you can thank the Lotus. And the same thing, that brings us into the Spiders.
It's true.
The Spiders with the 1ZZ 1.8, kind of similar to the old first gen. They were great. for what they are. They do have a few reliability things, but for the most part, they're a great motor. Downside is they have very little power. Now, again, in the Spider, unlike the Gen 2, the Spider is more reminiscent to the first gen, where it doesn't need a lot of power to be a fun car. Now, that being said, there are Spider owners out there who want more horsepower purely for the fact they want more horsepower. And so what do? You do a 2ZZ, and that was in the Lotus.
Yep.
That was the Lotus Elise motor. So it's still 1.8, but it's just slightly higher compression, better flowing heads, this, that, and the other thing. And you can get just shy of 200 horsepower out of one of those 2ZZ motors. So that'd be similar to putting a 20 valve into an old first gen.
Yeah.
Because they bolt up to the transmission, everything is fairly similar as the 20 valve would have been to the old 4A. But the difference is just a few minor tweaks here and there, a new motor mount, a little bit of wiring, and you have a 2ZZ. Now, the only other real option for a Spider, if that's not good enough for you, if 170 wheel horse isn't good enough for you, is something more extreme, which is probably the 2GR again. And
2GR, but once you're in that realm, you can easily go backwards if you wanted to a 3S block.
you could.
Although at that point, it starts to get a little bit weird. You're like, oh, I'm gonna toss out my aluminum block for an iron block, and there are specific reasons why you might want to do that. We're not going to get into that today,
Yeah.
but
And yeah, as Shawn said, once you get into a certain realm of what you're doing, everything goes out the window. The K-swaps, for example,
that's true.
are great engines. They make a lot of power, and it's fairly affordable to do so because of the available
It also has a lot of aftermarket support.
It does, yeah. So it makes it more achievable if you're doing really big horsepower numbers. So dropping something like that in a Spider, totally doable. Something like that in a first gen, doable. You could even do it in a first gen. So
Second gen.
Any gen.
Yeah, that's true.
You could do them in any gen.
Put a four cylinder in any car, they fit basically.
But the K swaps, we don't do very many of them just because the demand isn't there compared to the other options, and
Price per dollar, it's a little bit on the expensive side. Actually, it's very much on the expensive side.
Yeah, because even though aftermarket parts are more affordable, the engine itself and getting it running in the car is more expensive.
Yeah.
So all in all, I know that's a really quick, brief run through of all the motors. Most of you already know what we've already talked about. I guess the last thing we'd say is, what is your favorite for the first gen?
My favorite for the first gen is going to have to be the supercharged. The factory supercharged. It's lovely.
That's what you drive, isn't it?
It is. I daily it actually. So.
And I'm a fan of the 20 valve. And although it has a few little running problems as far as getting it to run quite right with vacuum issues and ignition issues and all that stuff, that if you have a 20 valve, I'm sure you've experienced. If you can get over that, I think the 20 valve is a fantastic motor.
It does sound great.
It sounds fantastic. For the second gen, do you have a favorite motor for the second gen?
Second gen, it's got to be the 2GR. I mean, without question.
Without question.
It's the most amount of motor you can get for the money. It, I think, fits the car fantastically. It's quick out of the corners. Yeah. The one downside, in my opinion, is that it does not have the turbo excitement of blow-off valves and all the other things. Although, apparently everyone's just taking the blow-off valves off, so what do I know, right?
I guess I would agree. The 2GR, in my opinion, or I guess in both our opinion, is the best hands-down motor for a 2GR, or for the second-gen MR2. The downside being, I would also say, the cost. It's the most expensive of all the swaps.
It's true.
And as you said, you lose kind of the Fast and the Furious turbo enjoyment. And so some guys love that in a turbo car. They like the spool of the turbo. They like the sound of the turbo. They like wastegates going off, bing, bang.
There's not a lot that beats a turbo sound.
There's not. But the 2GR also has a legendary exhaust note of its own. So if you can forgo the sound of a blow-off valve, you can make up for it for some... it almost sounds like some exotic supercar when you're racing up a mountain road and you have the sound of the exhaust. It sounds pretty
It does sound good. Little lightweight flywheel.
It sounds
nice
phenomenal.
exhaust, and it really comes into its own.
It does.
It's
That's what sells most of the swaps for our customers. When they hear one, they go, "Yep, that's the one we need." So,
if you're looking at, I will say, just as a point of reference, the 2GR not again the end all be all. It's not the perfect motor. It's not the best motor ever made. It's just a nice motor that fits in the MR2 without too much trouble.
Exactly. I mean, we could fit a lot of different things in if we had enough time and money.
Yeah.
And then I guess the last one is the Spider. It's limited options.
Yeah.
I would say my favorite for the Spider is the 2ZZ.
2ZZ is nice. I mean,
again, it's a momentum car. It doesn't need a whole lot of power. So a 2ZZ gives you enough to be quick out of the corners, quick enough down the line, I would say. But it still retains the simplicity and the kind of dimensions of the car without going to some large displacement motor, which doesn't really fit the nature of that vehicle, in my opinion. Would you agree?
I mean, in terms of accessible swaps, there's no question 2ZZ is the one to put in the Gen 3.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and then pretty soon here, one of the next videos we'll talk about is going to be a slightly longer video, and it will be about the best engine for your FRS or BRZ, because that's a whole nother can of worms.
It's true.
And but at least with the MR2, the blessing and the curse is that not everything can fit in the back of the car, so we're limited on options we can do. But in some sense, that's good because it makes it an easy choice, or at least somewhat easy choice.
It limits your options. You can say, well, this, or this, and it sort of helps you from just wandering off into the weeds. Like, you put anything in there. It's like true, but
exactly. So let us know what you guys think, if you agree with us, or if you have a different favorite than we do for one of the 3 different generations. Leave a comment, or you can also ask us about any of these. We have a lot of experience with every engine in every car. We've seen it all. So check it out, that next video that we're going to be coming out with soon. And until then,
I do have one final note.
Oh, yes.
A surprise.
Surprise.
P.S. If you're really struggling with the Gen 2, and this is one of the things I see, we see actually a fair amount of times. People come in with a very badly worn Gen 2 because it's been thrashed over 20 some odd years. If you're looking for either rebuild or replacement, a lot of times it's incredibly cost effective to go for a very surprisingly for an engine swap. Sometimes it's really cost effective if you're doing a full tear down and rebuild, all gaskets, rehoning, machining. All of a sudden you're like, oh well, a Gen 4, Gen 5 is
cheaper,
much less expensive, and gives you your sort of new car reliability.
And that's, I guess the only thing I'd add to that is we started working at the shop, and a lot of the things that we originally were kind of advertising were repairs on the MR2s, and repairs of the old engines kind of became engine swaps because the price point is just there. Again, if you're doing a big horsepower build, it's a different question.
Sure, or if you're trying to keep the car as factory and original as possible,
different
question. So,
but again, we're going down a rabbit hole.
It's true. Yeah, stop the video before we
stop
keep
it
on
there.
going.
We'll talk more about it. Let us know what you guys want to hear next too. And until then, we'll see you later and keep wrenching.